Okay,
Yep.
guys, so welcome to this triumvirate session where me, Prashant, Luke is going to share the viewpoint of what is CISSP, the risk perspective, because I personally feel in last, when you're talking about 10 years perspective and all that, uh, the base of the CISSP is the risk management. Every topic, every context start with risk management. And that is why we are here. And in this session, we're going to discuss about the agenda of in this session, we're going to discuss about the context of the risk and how the risk management is integrated with all the domains and why it is important for you to understand that perspective. So with us, we have a Luke, we have a Prashant, and we'll all three share their viewpoints, all the context from the architect, governance, and network perspective, and we're going to give you an actionable strategy that you can use when you're preparing for your CSS. It's a very important strategic point. If you understood this well, I'm sure then this exam will be very easy for you. So over to you, Luke and Prashant. Do you want to share your viewpoint about this before we start this today's session?
Prashant, you or me?
I think
Okay.
you can go ahead. You can go ahead.
Okay. Welcome, security professionals. Thank you for attending. I know you guys either are at work or after work or attending late night, and we really appreciate your time with us. What we're going to go over this review is if your exam is coming up in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, we're going to go over some things that it's not going to be step by step like this is the steps of the BCP DRP. This is this. We're going to give you a vast way to connect everything in the cybersecurity realm. So whether your weak point's domain 1 or your strength is domain 7, doesn't matter. By the end of this session, we're going to look at all the domains and show you how to correlate everything together and take that with you to the exam, to take that knowledge and that connection and correlation with you to the exam. Let's talk about domain 1, security and risk management. And by the end of the session, you will see why domain 1 is the biggest domain to learn. Not to mention it's got the most weightage in terms of the exam, like you're going to be testing on it the most, but you'll see exactly why that is the reason. So domain 1, we're going to talk about the biggest risk in each domain. We're going to go through all the steps here, and by the time after we're done with the biggest risks in each domain, we're going to give you the most actionable strategies to fix those risks, to correct those risks. And by the time we're done, we'll have this sheet completely filled up. Everybody can see my screen, yeah? The biggest risk to domain 1 is what happens in domain 1. Domain 1, when the senior management, let me just start my timer just so I know on the way. 2-minute timer. Domain 1, we're going to say the biggest risk is indecision by senior management. Senior management has to be decisive. They must provide direction. So the biggest risk in domain 1 is not having a policy. That is the biggest risk to domain 1.
Agreed.
And the actionable strategy on that is what we're gonna come back to that. And after we've gone through domain 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, we'll come back to domain 1 and we'll do that. So domain 2, or do you guys have anything to add for domain 1? Why does not having a policy a big risk in domain 1? Prashant.
Policy is the foundation, actually. If you take an example, policy is the foundation of any governance. And if you see the top-down approach of any organization, we start with the strategy. We talk about the enablers in the strategy, then we talk about the policies, and then we talk about the program. Let's say example, we have a this year plan is to introduce the information security governance. Definitely it should be backed and supported by the policy. So that's the second step is create a policy. Based on a policy, we create a ISMS program. Because policy talk about why we need any kind of initiative. And if it's not having an approval, then you can't do anything in the company. So that's why I believe by the top-down approach, the policy is the most important foundation. And if it does not have, it's considered as the most important risk because it comes with the accountability. That's why I'm telling you guys, whenever you get a context of the question or when you're understanding the domain one, it's very important for you. Without policy, you can't do anything. And that's why policy talk about the approval of management. Policy is the risk of the company if you don't have it, and policy is a foundation.
Right. Yeah, I agree. So policy is, for me, it's like a blueprint for any organization, for the establishment. If an organization doesn't have a policy, they are clueless. They don't know what to do next. So that's the reason I always use an analogy that it acts as a navigation system, as a compass for them to navigate through challenges. Because if they don't have the policy, they don't know what to do next.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Thank you,
Yeah.
guys. That was our 2 minutes for domain 1. Domain 2, what is the biggest risk in Domain 2? Domain 2 is also, if you guys notice, the shortest domain in all the CISSP. It's the shortest chapter in all the books. So it makes it easier for you to pinpoint the risk. And the biggest risk of Domain 2 is for sure, if you've studied well, and Tarang, I know you know this, and Yanni, I know you know this, is incorrect data classification.
Yes,
Because incorrect data class, oops, let me start the timer. Incorrect data classification means we have to order our assets in terms of criticality. We have to say that, oh, this firewall is a high valued asset for our company, but this printer on the third floor is not a really high valued asset in our company. So we're going to spend at least $10,000 on this firewall, but we're not going to spend anything more than, $100 on this printer. So you have to classify the printer as either a low priority, a 1 out of 10, a 2 out of 10, and you classify the firewall as a 10 out of 10, meaning high priority.
I agree on
Agreed.
that part. If you take an example also, and when you're talking about the classification of data, same like when you're preparing for CISSP, it's not possible for you to read word by word, line by line. It is not possible for you to remember word by word, line by line. So by last week of the month, last week of your exam preparation, you only focus on the important areas, what you believe it's important from the exam perspective, and that's how you classify your topics, which is relevant for the exam. Because by end of that, it's a matter of $60 or $70, whatever it is. So I believe the most important or most biggest concern in the asset security is not having a proper classification, because if you don't have a classification, you can't drive the controls.
Right.
Excellent.
So the,
Prashant.
the controls the controls are the detrimental factor for any security. So the classification is the detrimental factor for any security controls. If I don't know what exactly my classification is, I won't be able to choose an appropriate control for my assets. So
Exactly.
not knowing what to protect is the bigger problem than not having a protection. So
Exactly.
it's very important that we need to come up with a proper classification. Data owners needs to classify it, and then choosing an appropriate controls accordingly. It's very, very important.
Exactly. And that's how we say any asset security start with the visibility of assets. And
Agreed.
visibility drive the classification, classification define the level of controls. I want to extend some one more minute on this. If you talk about any organization, Luke, we only have a three type of data. One is called as a operation data, one is called as a business data, one is called as a regulatory data. If you take example of regulated data, we talk about privacy, PI data, and all that. When it comes to operation data, your SIM logs and all that. When you talk about business data, we talk about the trade secrets. So if you take any industry, you see this kind of a data. Now, but when it comes to domain two, the most important area apart from classification is how you manage the privacies. So those preparing for this exam, they should also focus on the risk from a GDPR perspective, inter-border data transfer, adequate controls when they're moving data outside the country of GDPR, Europe perspective. So they need to have very good clarity on this area. Along with that, how you're destroying the data, how you're managing data lifecycle, that is also very important. So those who preparing for the certification, make sure you should focus on these areas. Okay, because the biggest risk is not having a classification. After that, the biggest risk is if you don't destroy the data properly, because you have a classified data and you have to destroy it, but you have not able to destroy properly, and someone get hold of it. So it's like a breach of disclosure. So it's very important, you need to have a clarity around that area. So biggest risk is non-data classification. Second biggest risk is you have not destroyed the data properly, or you have not sanitized the media properly.
Perfect. Prashant, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody the difference between data privacy and PII, personally identifiable information privacy as well?
So PII is any information that can be used to identify an individual. That could be a direct identifier such as your phone number, account number, credit card details, social security. In India, we have UID, Aadhaar card, and all this kind of a thing. These all are the direct identifiers. Indirect identifiers are something that is considered as PII, but might not be able to directly identify an individual. For example, demographic data. So for example, my zip code would still be PII, but that zip code won't lead to an individual directly, right? So that's an indirect PII that we have. It's important to have these kind of differences known if you're preparing for any kind of security related certifications like your CISSP. Privacy is the concealment of any kind of personal information. Now, that could be anything like what I'm doing right now, what I do at home, or what I do at my free time. That not necessarily needs to be disclosed to unauthorized individuals. That not necessarily is what PII is, but it's the privacy requirement that we have. And For that, we don't necessarily need a specific regulation or act. The countries, they generally have their constitutional rights. For example, they have the fundamental rights to privacy. So that's what dictates to the privacy requirement.
Perfect answer. Perfect answer. Let's move on to thank you, Prashant. I even learned something on that. Domain three. What is the biggest risk in domain three? So when you think domain three, we think what? Oh, cryptography, encryption, digital signature, symmetric encryption, AES 256, block ciphers, 56 bits, initialization vectors, salting. But that's all encryption, right? And what's the to use a pun, what is the key to understanding cryptography and symmetric and asymmetric encryption? The key is key management. You guys like that one? It is key management. Key management is the biggest risk to domain three because encryption, you can use AES 256, 2056 bits or 4096 bits, and you can use public private keys and public key infrastructure. You can even put Kerberos through an IPsec VPN, but none of that will matter if you don't have proper key management. So key management is extremely important and one of the biggest risks of domain three security engineering. The keys are usually, I've worked for companies where they'd put some passwords and keys in an Excel sheet, or they put it in like just a zip file, WinZip. I don't know if anybody even remembers that anymore, or in the cloud or on premise. So it matters if it's on cloud or on premise. So key mismanagement is one of the biggest risks in domain three because of cryptography. So don't just focus on cryptography and encryption. Understand what the higher level importance of that is.
I agree on that part, but I think this is also one of the favorite topic of our brother Prashant Mohan, because he sleep, he live, he drink, he eat security
Yes.
architecture.
Yes.
So yeah, so
Uh,
you please go ahead, Prashant.
sure,
Then I
sure,
will
sure.
share my
Thank you.
last point. Yeah,
Thank you. Now,
I don't want to become between you and your love, which is your security
Beloved
architecture. Yeah,
cryptography.
right.
yeah,
Yes.
Thank you.
not arc or
He
architecture.
will go into quantum mechanics right now if you guys
I
want
believe
to, but
so.
I don't think
Yeah,
we have time for that.
yeah. Go ahead, go ahead.
So it's important to understand the key management, and the essence of key management is into the life cycle of key. How
Mm.
keys are generated, the keys are stored, keys are distributed, keys are accessed, keys are exchanged, transferred, everything. And at the end, you also need to ensure the importance of secure destruction of the keys, right? So knowledge about key encryption keys, which is also referred as KEK. So it's very important that so in domain two, you would learn or probably would have already learned about the concept of cryptographic erasure or crypto shredding. That also applies to the keys, right? So it's very important that the whole narrative of secure cryptography or secure encryption is to manage your keys. If your keys are not managed properly, it's not gonna, even if you use the like de facto standard of encryption, which is AES, it doesn't matter.
And
Perfect. Perfect.
but if I get a time permit for, because domain three is a very big domain,
Agreed.
so if possible, can you give me 1 minute? Okay. See,
Yep.
in this domain, when you're talking about those who are preparing for the certification, make sure they should know TCB, very important, because that's a backbone of any systems. And when you're talking about TCB, with TCB, you need to also understand the cryptography. And most important thing in cryptography, we need to understand key. If key is compromised, data is compromised. Key is lost, data is lost. So ultimately, key is the most important part. Then, when you're talking about domain three, physical security is important, especially in the data center area. So, data centers, you need to understand risk. The biggest risk in data center is human safety. Okay, so you need to make sure you have all the controls around data center from a people safety perspective, fail secure, then uptime institute standards. You need to have very clarity on that area. Those who are preparing for the certification, make sure you should have a very good understanding of how the security model works, because security models basically talk about how the subject communicate with the objects. Because if you don't have that visibility, it lead to the biggest risk. And when you're building a solution during that time, we need to have that clarity. Moreover, nowadays what happen is I have seen the people are more concerned about zero trust, no trust but verify. That is also very important for us to understand. Okay, then we have a keep it simple principle. How we can use keep it simple principle, that is also a very important thing you need to understand. Microservices, monolithic architectures, and serverless architecture in a cloud with domain 5, it's very very important for you to understand. Like example, like role of SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS. Like let's take example of SaaS stand for software as services. As a user, you have very limited control. So SaaS in India, in North India, we called as a mother-in-law. See, before getting married, you have a less control over the mother-in-law. So only by the contract you manage everything. So same like when you go for the SaaS, you need to have very limited controls, right? So that's something a clarity we need in same case here. So that kind of visibility you need to have. Okay, then IDaaS is there, identity as a services is there. So you need to have that clarity also, so that according to that you can able to manage. Okay, so CASB is there. That is also a very important topic you need to understand. So these are small things you should able to focus. So according to that we can make it.
Yes. I only wish that was the same for my mother-in-law. I could control. Oh, did I say that? Thank you, Prav. That was
Yeah.
awesome. For domain four, the Prashant, for domain four, the biggest risk. I when we know this, I put down weak password use for key management. But you know what? We can X this out. Do I have a strike through? Do I have strike through? We do have a strike through. We can just put weak passwords because that network security for weak passwords go through user systems, user computers, their
Yeah.
laptops, routers, firewalls, load balancers, online passwords, like all those apps that you use to log in. Like, sometimes when I used to log in at work, I had to log into like 8 different things just to like start my day. So weak passwords in that case applies to, I mean, we're not going to tell you like, oh, you have to change the admin password. You know that. Everybody knows that. But weak passwords just means we'll get back to that in domain one too. So for me, it's weak passwords. That means not just, it's going beyond just, alphanumeric or just text. Weak passwords means having a good password cycle, a life cycle that you change it every 30, 60, or 90 days. So weak password isn't just a technical control. It's also an administrative awareness.
Hmm. Agree. See, one thing I think there's a clarity we need to have around this area is, when it comes to, we have a brute force attack and we have a dictionary attack. So both are same. There's no difference. There is a difference in terms of countermeasure. When it comes to dictionary attack, the countermeasure is you have to use passphrase. When it comes to brute force attack, you need to have a countermeasure which is called as a account lockout policy. So you need to have that clarity. Okay, and those who preparing for domain 4, see, domain 1 talk about building governance, domain 2 talk about how you manage the asset, domain 3 talk about building security, but domain 4 talk about how you manage the security, how the data basically flow within that security. So the 5 biggest risk in domain for 4 is basically data in transit, inside in plain text, which can be intercepted easily. Second is basically no parameter. That's something you need to consider. The third most important part is protocol security part, which protocols we are using for what. And fifth is basically about the OSM models and all that. So if you take an example of TCP and UDP, you need to have a basic clarity about what is TCP UDP. Because domain 4 guys, it's very important for you to understand. You need to understand the concept, how it works. Then only you know where it works. Let's say example DMZ. Until unless you don't know what is DMZ, how it works, you don't know where it works. So we need to place those server in the DMZ, which is a public facing side. Correct me if I'm wrong, Liu, because you're from network security and Prashant, you're from architect perspective. Until unless you don't have a visibility about how it works, you don't know where it works. Until unless we don't know how the packet filtering firewall works, you don't know where it works. So we need to place a packet filtering firewall on the on the border of the network. That's a very important part. So that
You have to know
clarity is
packet
required.
filtering. You have to exactly. You have to know
Exactly.
packet filtering firewall. You have to know stateful filter firewall. Make sure you definitely know the difference between packet and stateful filtering.
Exactly.
Most modern enterprises have done away with packet filtering and they've switched completely to stateful firewalls. But I'm a network security engineer by trade. Once I typed everything on my keyboard and I hit send, so let's say I created an IPsec VPN, okay, a
Hmm,
site-to-site VPN. I created the group one, the Diffie-Hellmans, the encryption, the hashing. I did all that. That's my side of the firewall. Once
hmm,
I press push policy on, say, a checkpoint firewall, and I push policy,
hmm,
now I gotta wait. Now I don't know where all the packets are going. I'm not since I work at a security operations center and I'm in charge of the firewall. I'm not the network team. I'm not the load balancer team, and I'm not my peer firewall. So all that is out of my hands. So you have to take into consideration all those hands that touch all the other different routers, all the next hops, and all the risk in between those. And a good way to think about that is not not that they're out of your control, but that they're part of your supply chain. They're part of your whole supply chain and third party vendors
true.
who are in charge. So that's also part of your risk right there. So weak
Exactly.
passwords, to bring it back to the biggest risk, the weak passwords means it's not just your weak passwords, it's everybody else's passwords you have to worry about too. Because they might have a weak password that might inadvertently affect you. So you have to keep aware of that as well.
True. And that's why you could take an example of TCP UDP. Okay, TCP is connection oriented, UDP is a connectionless. So when you're having a conversation with your wife or husband, that's called UDP, prone to every time error. and you finish the communication in 30 seconds, because communication start with no logic, finish with no logic. Where you're doing a communication with a friend like me, Prashant, Luke, speak for 1 hour when we have a time, because we start with acknowledgement, respect, and all that. So these kind of a clarity you need to bring when it comes to the things. So you need to have a clarity on the DOS and DDoS attack. When your relative is pushing for the marriage, when your parents are pushing for the marriage, that's a DOS attack. When entire relatives are pushing you for the marriage, that's a DDoS attack. So these kind of a clarity you need to have. What is a thin line difference between the firewall and DLP? Is it clear? Firewall used to block the packets, DLP used to block the data. So these kind of a things you need to bring so that you can connect the dots. Okay, yeah, continue.
Are we recording this, by the way?
Yeah,
Just
yeah, yeah, yeah. We're
okay.
making a healthy session so that
Okay.
it will be like a family oriented session. CISSP.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, and,
let's
and
just
remember, all our wives are
Yeah.
going to watch this too. Remember that.
exactly.
All the husband
Yeah.
also going to watch this. So there's no discrimination based on caste, color,
Yes,
creed, or
correct,
husband,
correct,
wife.
correct,
Yeah.
correct. We've set the risk parameters already. We've
Mm.
already taken care
I'm only
into account
concerned
our
about the
biggest risks.
participant who attending the session from the home. Make sure they get a timely food, lunch, breakfast, dinner. I'm very worried about my participants who attending this session. Okay.
Yes, yes. If anything, take that last part away from you guys as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah.
Prashant, do you have anything
God
to
bless
add?
them. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I
All
think
the,
we are well on time, and you guys took a great explanation and loved the analogy. I'm looking at the chat room, and people are
Mm,
literally enjoying this.
mm.
hey,
So
Faisal Sheikh, you passed already. You're Faisal. You passed already, right? Or sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Good to see you.
there's there are a lot of
Domain
people who have
five.
passed already. They're
Yeah,
just
they
here.
just want to see how the new examples are coming in
Well,
CISSP.
that's
Yeah,
Right.
awesome. That's awesome. Let's
yeah.
move on to domain five.
Yes.
So for domain five, we're not going to address the biggest risk because there are lots of risks. But what we're going to
Yeah.
talk about is a difficult topic
Mm,
that you will be highly tested on, and it's very hard to get your mind across. And that is, and we'll go over it right now. And if you can, it's Kerberos mismanagement. Now we're like, oh wow, we never thought about it's domain five is identity and access management. Why
mm,
are we specifically talking about Kerberos mismanagement? The reason is that okay, Kerberos has an authentication server, ticket granting server, a TGS, AS,
mm,
TGT, all that, right? But
mm,
at a high level, you have to remember that Kerberos mismanagement can lead to two different types of compromises: a confidentiality compromise and a availability compromise. Since the tickets are all in the Kerberos' central server, that is a single point of failure. So you need to have that's one of the biggest risks of using Kerberos. And the other one is since all the tickets are in the single place, if that single authentication server or the Kerberos management server gets compromised, that is a breach of confidentiality. So it's important to Kerberos in the fact to just learn about confidentiality and availability, because if the ticket granting server is compromised, you lose both confidentiality and availability. And I'm sure integrity too, because using the tickets to get access to other systems, you can make changes to those systems. So it leads to a long-term mismanagement, long-term risk. So one of the biggest way to identify risk in domain five is just think about it in Kerberos mismanagement, because that really gives you a broader view of all other things in identity and access management domain.
I agree on
Agree.
that part. And Prashant, you want to go ahead?
No. Go ahead.
No, no, go ahead, please. I will discuss the last part then.
No. I was just emphasizing on the importance of knowing the overall. I won't say don't get into the too much details about the entire architecture and the nitty-gritties and the steps of the Kerberos. That's probably might not be very relevant for your CISSP exam. Good to
Mm,
know for the understanding. But yes, high level understanding of how does the Kerberos work, the overall picture, the larger pictures, it's quite important, because if you don't know that, it would be difficult to get hold of what exactly is the significance of KDC, what exactly is the significance of TGT, what exactly is how do we ensure that TGS or the ticket granting service or the tickets, the service ticket which we get to access the resources, those relationships and everything, it's quite important for us to know.
And those who are preparing for this, one thing I miss in domain 4 is SDN, software defined network. You need to have very good clarity on the SDN also. You know how the SDN works and all that, which we missed. But when it comes to domain 5, you need to have very good clarity on the federation. You need to understand the risk in SAML. You need to know the concern with SAML. Like in SAML, when they issue the assertion, it is basically doesn't have a time bound thing. But when it comes to OAuth 2, it is the time bound. So when it comes to the biggest risk in federation is basically SAML provides static token, OAuth 2 is basically provide, or OpenID 2 is basically provide recession token. So we can change it. So in zero trust architecture is very important for you to understand. And second thing is that you need to have very good clarity on the different type of access controls. When to use RBAC, when to use ABAC, which risk will be addressed by the RBAC, which risk will be addressed by the rollback and all that, and MAC and all that. So this clarity you need to have. Unless you don't have that clarity, you will not able to make it. That's a very important thing to understand here. And it's a very good point which Luke has said about in Kerberos. You need to have a very good clarity on the golden ticket and silver ticket. So let's take example, you got married. See, if you want the partner property, you cannot convince the partner. You need to convince his in-laws. So if you get convinced his in-laws, like you have access to golden ticket. So by this, you can basically own the entire property. So that is called as a golden ticket. But if you compromise one of his relative, that's called silver ticket. So same thing happened in the Kerberos. So in Kerberos, if you basically compromise one system and one session ID, that's a silver ticket. But when you compromise the entire Kerberos server, that is called as a golden ticket. So that's the biggest concern. So you need to have a clarity on that area. Then you need to also have a concern about the lateral movement. Lateral movement basically moving from one network to another network. Is it clear? And what is the most effective countermeasure for that is you need to have this called, what is that called, air gap or micro segmentation. So these kind of things you need to have a clarity. And same like, when you're throwing any kind of party in your house, there will be some people who get drunk, so they will trying to move from your hall to the room. There is a possibility, and they might occupy your bed for a sleeping. So by having a proper segmentation, you ensure they will sleep on the hall only. So that is called as a micro segmentation. That kind of a clarity you need to have. So you need to understand the risk in domain 5, and you need to see how the domain 1 to domain 4 controls you can able to implement. Yeah.
Yeah. Holy cow! How do I even follow that? I will get. Okay, for Kerberos, Prob, that was awesome. For Kerberos, say you're taking the CSP exam, right? And you're like, one of the question comes up and it's like, hey, something to do with Kerberos. I can't think of a question or the context, but something to do with Kerberos. It is, it's a high level exam, but it has technical concepts. So if you're approached with that and you just don't know what the answer is on the CSP exam when it comes to Kerberos, and the choices mention nothing about tickets, nothing about authentication server, nothing about compromise, just work backwards. So you say, hey, we have Kerberos in information security. Why do we have that? First, try to identify which domain Kerberos is in. Well, Kerberos is in identity and access management. If it's an identity and access management, what are we doing with it? We're having users access objects as a subject. We're doing that using tickets. So why do we need that? Who tells us to do that? Us as engineers, do we do that? Do we decide to, hey, I'm a network security engineer. Today I'm going to walk into work and I'm going to implement Kerberos. Am I going to do that? We're going to wait until someone at a higher level tells us we need an identity and access management system that doesn't send passwords across the wire. So that is the main reason we use Kerberos. And who would say that? Management would tell you that. So you can't think of like ordinary pass subject to object pass authentication because that sends passwords across the wire. They wanted something where a centralized server has the tickets and the passwords, all the authentication mechanisms already on it, so you don't need to send passwords across. And the person who gives you that edict is senior management. So at a high level, the reason we use Kerberos, if you get stuck in a CISSP questions, try to find a high level question or the answer that identifies. We use that to make sure passwords don't go over the wire or some sort of way that we protect that high level concept, confidentiality.
And exactly. And one more important thing we have missed to discuss in cryptography and also in domain 5 is that if people are using a same password, definitely it will generate a same hash value. So that is called as a hash collision. So you need to have a clarity on what is hash collision and all that. Is it clear? So hash collision and what is a countermeasure for hash collision is basically we need to have a salting. Okay. It is
Yep.
same like, two colleagues are saying the same thing. My manager is the best manager in this world. But there's a third guy who doesn't like your increment. He will add one statement to that and he forward the statement to your manager is he's saying that you are the worst manager in this world. So here what happened by adding some salt into the statement, okay, he changing the output. The salting is basically the same thing. So if two people are saying the same thing, by adding a random value, we make the hash value unique. So always remember one thing, if the context talking about the hash collision, the most effective countermeasure is basically called as a salting. So that clarity you need to have.
Thank you, Prob. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. The same with to go back on Kerberos, it's the same with SAML and federated identity. If you're getting questions about federated identity or SAML or
Mm.
OAuth, and none of the choices sounds like none of the choices is identity as a service or or a token or encrypted token or the session token that goes if or an assertion. None of these make sense. Your high level answer is, why do we have federated identity? For single sign on, to implement single sign on. They're not exclusive, but they're used together. Why do we have single sign on? So users do not have multiple passwords to remember, because that is the
Mm.
think like a manager way. Users don't have passwords to remember. It's not a lot of overhead, and you just have one sign on and one federated identity with everybody involved in that federation that shares their own networks and business partners, and you use one identity to carry yourself everywhere, which comes with its own risk. But management wants it, so we don't have a lot of passwords. So we, as engineers, have to implement federated identity.
True.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right, Tarang. You and I went over on that call yesterday. Should we move on? Prashant, do you have something
Yeah.
to add, or we can move? Okay.
No. I think we can move on. We want to make sure that we take a lot of questions from our
Yes. Correct.
participants as well.
Domain 6, and this is security assessment and testing. I hope I spelled everything right. And one of the
Yeah.
biggest ones is, boom, lack of automated testing. And why is lack of automated testing important? Because I asked Yanni the other day, he's on the call right now, what is the difference between pen testing and vulnerability assessment? And vulnerability assessment is to look for vulnerabilities that are already there, the one that exists. For pen testing, we're looking for new exploits. We're looking for things that we have not found before that our vulnerability scanner missed. So that's why I use pen testing. For both of these, are we, as a single person, as a pen tester who makes, I know pen testers who make $500,000 a year, or vulnerability management guys who make $250,000 a year. Are they all sitting at home or at work doing this on their own, one by one, coming up with ways? No, they're using automation because management wants, one, no mistakes, and they want it done fast, and they want it done with confidence. Us as humans will make mistakes, and we will get lazy because we have our subconscious and a mind that works that way. Machines don't think that way. So with automated testing, it's more efficient, almost next to zero mistakes unless the machine has an error, and it's faster. So always use automated testing. And if you look to the left of the screen, the primary CSP concepts in order that we have, I think number 8 will be use automated tools where appropriate. So for testing, use automated tools. So lack of automated testing leads to mistakes and inefficiencies.
Agreed.
That's great.
And sorry, Prop. Just wanted
No,
to
go ahead.
add a bit of it. So in line with what Luke was mentioning, and that is where there's another concept within your CISSP, which is breach and attack simulation, BAS
Yep.
tools. So that technology actually helps in accelerating the job what your red team people does. It helps in creating a simulated environment where you can go ahead and run the attack vectors and see how exactly what level of or what magnitude of damage you can do it in your environment and how well your defense mechanisms are prepared for that. So I think that's actually resonates with what exactly Luke was mentioning there. So automation is the key because we expect the repeatable results there.
Exactly. And there's always a doubt between the PT and red teaming is that PT has a defined scope, whereas red teaming does not have a defined scope. Red team is basically doing an assessment on people, process, and technology. And if we want to automate the PT, we use the breach attack simulations and all that, which save time. But according to that, we have to see what is the outcome we need to have. One more important thing is that when we're talking about domain 6, about security assessment testing, what the first step in the VAPT is not about scoping. The first step is basically get an approvals, because without approval, you can't do the VAPT. Every company go for VA, but not go for PT because PT is basically more aggressive. So you need to have that
Always.
clarity. Yeah. And second thing is that when it comes to domain 6, it's very, very important for you to have a clarity around the SOC reports. You really need to understand what is the importance of SOC 1, SOC 2, and SOC 3. You need to know that you need to have a really good clarity on the type 1 and type 2. And along with that, you need to also understand where the SOC 1 fit and where the SOC 2 basically fit. So that's a very important part. And one disadvantage, the biggest risk when you're doing a PT is that it impact the availability. So that's something you need to understand. It is like, a partner saying, "Are you there, honey?" And if you say yes, then you will get a task. And if you say no to that, it's an attack. So no, this is something you need to see. So that's why we always, honey, you there? And if you say yes, that is basically VA. You exploit the person has exploited your vulnerability. Now you have to complete the task. If you're not, then you become unavailable. That's a PT. So you need to see how you plan your activities. That's something you need to have. Yeah.
Well,
just to
I
add
do.
on that, sorry, so the way you mentioned about the approvals and everything, it's important that you also protect the pen test reports, because that contains highly confidential information about your own vulnerabilities. It's important that you classify the reports with the highest classification, preserve it, protect it from any unauthorized access. Because if a malicious user get access to that, you're literally serving everything on the platter.
Hmm.
It's very important.
And for approval, when you do pen testing, you're basically breaking a system. So the approval, if you break a system and you don't get approval, it's in a way it's illegal, right? But you as an engineer are not going to get in trouble. You're part of the company. So when we look on TV and there's a breach or something that happens, who's explaining everything to the Senate or to the government? It's the CEO of the company. So the policy and management have to provide approval to cover themselves to say this was a sanctioned pen testing, this was a sanctioned approval by us. So even if something does break, even if you inadvertently compromise the data of all your company's users, it's a bad thing, but the approval was there. It's also a way to cover yourself to make sure you're not blamed for breaking systems or seen as somebody who's kind of like an insider threat as well.
Agree. And one more important section, I think we have missed this. We need to cover also software testings, because software testing is also part of there. We talk about unit testing, integration testing,
Hmm. Hmm.
and component-based testing. You need to have a clarity on that area. And there's a new trend which is coming in, that is IST, SAST, and DAST. So DAST, SAST, and IST. When to do what? That clarity you need to have. Yeah.
Hmm.
Great.
Should we move to domain 7?
Yep.
Yep. Yep.
Domain 7, biggest risk, it's security operations. Security operations is all about responding to attacks, breaches, patches, zero
Mm,
days, exploits, and we need to respond. We need to be reactive. We need to be
mm,
reactive and respond. If something happens, we need to respond to that. I mean, Prashant, Prab, me as a technical person, Prab as a GRC person, Prashant
mm,
as a security architecture, we all have different responses to different attacks, or maybe even the same attack. So the best
mm.
way to do that is no incident response to a password compromise.
Yeah, that's why these all
So
trigger
have
lead
a
to the
incident
incidents. Yeah,
response.
these all trigger to the incidents. Yeah, go ahead, Luke. Sorry.
No, that's good. So incident response. So having a incident response, and for the exam, you have to know the steps of incident response. You
Exactly.
have to know
Very important.
you have to
Very
know step
important.
one is detection. Without detection, first of all, you're not going to know what to do. So
Mm,
you as a company, you as a manager, you as thinking like a manager, if someone is saying, "Hey, we have a firewall down," not necessarily a security breach, but the firewall is just down because it got overloaded with high connections. Because the firewall is down, you have to know, okay, which firewall, which section of the network, which data center, do we have a backup? Before doing anything else, you have to know all this information and then going on to the next step. So having an incident response gives you a process to follow. And the CSP exam is all about processes, frameworks, and following a established pattern instead of just going in without knowing anything of what to do. So it's just not just incident response to a passive compromise, but an incident response to anything. So the biggest risk in security operations, the word is operations. You have to keep operating you have to know what to do next. Everybody should know what to do next. And maybe it's not the engineer's idea all the time, but it is the manager's. And you have to think like a manager means you have to know what answer to give to your engineers next. They can be like, hey, we don't know what to do. And the answer to that is following the incident response because it gives you those answers quickly.
Yeah. And the articulation of the incident response, which is mentioned in your official study guide, that is pretty close to what happens in the real world.
mm.
So it's very important that we know the steps. And Luke was emphasizing about the reason why we need to know the steps, because if we don't know what to do next after we have responded, it's very important that we contain the damage. If we don't know that, it will, and if we start focusing on something else, maybe rebuilding the system and so on, we might end up missing out some of the key takeaways, like, let's say, stopping the spread, stopping it from spreading further, or maybe reporting it to the stakeholders or the regulatory requirements. These are some important steps we would end up missing out.
Exactly. And follow up with that, you really need to understand the difference between the incident and events, because so when we say you have planned your cricket match with your friends on Saturday and Sunday, so what is that called? It's an event. And
Here we go
suddenly
again.
Friday, yeah. I'm audible?
Yeah, here we go again.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And
Uh,
then Friday night, your partner said we have to go for a shopping, so it become an incident, right?
all
So,
right.
so then, and if you do it multiple time, it lead to the crisis, and then it lead to the disaster. So every event, okay, is not sorry, every event is not an incident, but every incident is an event. So that we need to validate. Okay, and you also need to understand the thin line difference between the incident management and problem management. Is incident management reduce the impact and problem management track the root cause. But follow with that, you also need to have a clarity about the DLP. You need to know what is DLP. DLP is also an important topic, which is used to protect your intellectual properties. And forget about the forensic investigation. You need to know the forensic investigation process, end-to-end investigation process. In the case of incident, what is the first step? You need to remove the network cable instead of remove the power cable. You can remove the power cable when you are in notice period, but if you are serving a job, you need to remove the network cable. Okay, in the case of disaster, you're going to protect your manager. Okay, in the notice period, depend upon you. You want to protect the laptop or manager, it's up to you. Okay, so you need to have that clarity. Along with that, you need to know disaster recovery plan, how it basically works. So in disaster recovery plan, we have a hot side, we have a cold side, we have a warm side. That clarity you need to have. So if Luke and Prashant, if you give me 1 minute of time, I want to give them clarity upon the different type of site, because that is also very important if time permit.
Yep, yep. Go for it.
Yeah, because based on the BIA only, you plan your DR side. Remember that team. Based on a BIA only, you plan your DR side. Now let's take example. You have your house. Now suppose there is a fight happen with your partner. So you're going to move to your parent house. Parents are already staying there. Everything is there. That is called as a redundant site. Everything is there. You just need to move your back. Now you invested some money on some properties and all that. In the case of fight, you move your bag with that to that property. You need to buy some basic thing and you start working there. Start staying there. That is called as a hot site. Now, third is that if nothing is there, you have your car. So you can sleep on your car and you can drive around that. That is called your mobile site. Now, definitely you have a friend who have a similar nature and he reserve one room for you. So he said, if any fight happen with your partner, you can use my room. And if any fight happen with my partner, I will use your room. So you have that mentality. Both friends know which kind of a character we are. So definitely we prone to fight. So that is called as a reciprocal site. Okay, but make sure both buildings should not be in the same location because it's prone to the risk. Is it clear? So you
Yeah,
in so
yeah.
you so based on the criticality, which is called BIA, you plan your sites. Is it clear? How critical is the operations? Okay. Or in worst case, Faisal said come to the road, but that is a worst case. So that is basically your cold site. Nothing is there. Okay, you need to build everything from a scratch there. And that's why
Yes.
the on road it's cost effective. So that's something you need to plan. But always know one thing, based on the disaster only you plan your site. And the clarity of disaster come from the BIA, business impact analysis.
Yeah. My hot site's the Holiday Inn Express on
Yeah.
Route 1. Prashant?
No, I think that's phenomenal, and I always use the Office US version where Dwight Schrute lit up the fire in the building just to test their preparedness. I mean, I'm not sure how many of you have watched that.
Yeah, I've seen
It's
that. It's
phenomenal. It's
famous.
phenomenal.
Yes.
I always use that
What
kind of a video for the classes. It's amazing.
Prashant, why don't you lead us into domain 8,
Sure.
biggest risk, insecure third party software. You guys see how Prashant just said sure without even knowing what I'm going to paste? That's what of a professional these guys are. He said
Yeah.
sure without knowing what I'm going to put in there, and he's going to talk very well about that. Go ahead, Prashant.
So yeah, so it's very important for this particular topic. Insecure third party software is quite relevant even in today's world because so I'm going to circle back to my architecture principles. So there is the phenomena that an enterprise architecture follows, like it's reuse before buy before building. So
Hmm.
before you go ahead and start purchasing any new software or building any new software, the first thing is to understand, do we really have to build it or buy it? Because can we reuse some of the existing capability? If not, there's always a debate between building versus buying. Now, they both of them have the pros and cons, but the efforts required to buy a software is significantly less. And in the longer run, it will be more economical decision to buy a software. So a lot of organizations rely heavily on buying a new software from third party. Now, that could be something that you can have it on-prem, or you can simply spin up a workload on in your infrastructure as a service. Or maybe it would be simply you can access some kind of a pre-built software as a service, you can consume as a service over internet, which we call it as a SaaS. it's very important that before we go ahead and buy any software, it's important to assess the security impact, right?
Hmm.
So build the strategy, like rolling out the RFPs, the decisions on what all the key things we're going to assess from a security perspective, then adapting it, making sure that all the kind of a provisioning is being done and all the kind of a sustainment means till the time you're going to use the software, the proper assessment, assurance, continuous assurance, you need to do it. And finally, the decommissioning, which we call it as disposal as well. So when we dispose of the software, it's very important that there should not be any kind of a data remnants. There should not be any kind of inactive user accounts. All the supporting infrastructure also needs to be decommissioned. It is very crucial, right? And that particular software can come in any shape, size, forms. That could be commercial off the shelf, which doesn't which is not customized as per your need, as per your necessity. It's simply like you have a software, you have to use it the way it was built. So, for example, your Microsoft operating system. Microsoft literally doesn't care where exactly the operating system is going to be used. It's going to be used on my desktop, your desktop, some president's systems, military, doesn't matter. It is what it is, right? So it's very important that we assess the security impact on these kind of a software. So it's
Perfect.
important. Yeah.
Excellent.
Parab, do you have something, or should we go on to actionable strategies?
One thing is that security should be start as early as possible, and it should be start as early. And second thing is that you need to have a very good clarity on the threat modeling done in which stage. Particular thing, database security, you need to have a clarity about poly instantiation, polymorphism. That clarity you need to have. Then you need to have a clarity on the API, SOAP, and REST. That visibility you need to have. You need to bring about the risk associated with how the API need to be integrated. Is it clear? Because API, you also sometimes act like a API between you and in-laws. So you just act like a read-only permission. Okay, but make sure you validate all the parameter before you collect the information. Then you need to have a visibility on the poly instantiation polymorphism. Okay, that is required. Inference and aggregation attacks. And most important part is SQL injection, cross-site scripting. You need to know the countermeasures on this area. So the biggest risk in domain 8 is you're not involving the security as early as possible. And on the application security, the biggest risk is input validation. So this clarity you need to have. So moral of the story is that SDLC steps, very, very important. Countermeasures of application security, very, very important. And along with that, you need to have a clarity about how the microservice and monolithic architecture is basically important to understand. So these things are basically there that you need to have a clarity.
I
Parab
would I would
touched on
just
stuff. Go ahead,
sorry.
Prashant. I'm sorry.
I,
Go ahead. No, go
I
ahead. Go
I
ahead.
would just like to add one important thing. What I think it's important for everyone who is preparing for CISSP. If you are preparing for CISSP in domain 8, the SDLC steps, if you want to learn, if you want to go through it, go watch out for props coffee shot. Those steps are closest
I
what you
agree.
need to know from your
I
examination
agree.
perspective. None of the resources talks about it because I know from where he has taken. It's a very very old
100%.
resource, and but that is still relevant, and it's the closest what you would need to know from an examination perspective. Just that's all. That's the only thing I wanted to add.
And
Thank
to
you
add
so
on to
much.
the software development lifecycle, yeah, you have if you don't have time, if you're rushing, if there's nothing that you study in domain 8, if there's nothing that you understand, at least try to understand the software development lifecycle and not just the steps. You shouldn't be just studying saying, "Whoa, step one is initiation, step two is design." You have to go beyond that. You have to know what the steps are, what's happening in each step, and most importantly, for your own good, to increase the chances of passing the CISP exam the first time, try to understand where in each step security belongs. And I
Hmm.
went over this the other day. So, step one of software development life cycles is initiation. Where does security come into initiation? You don't talk about, we're not talking about the threat model. We're not talking about the threat surface. We're not talking about code injections in step one. Step one is all about getting approval, allocating money, talking about the fact that we need a new software. So how do you put in security into that? The way to put security into the very step of software development lifecycle for you as a security professional and you as the future CISSP is just to mention security, just to have mention the fact that, hey, we need security. Otherwise, all those sitting around the table for the new software or for the new system. All they want to talk about is functionality. But you, as a security professional, must contribute and say, "Hey, don't forget to talk about security." So just mentioning the fact that we need security in step one of initiation is the security concern for the first stage. Yeah, consider Sudeep is right. Consider security is how you inject security in the first step of the software development lifecycle. Should we go to actionable strategies, guys?
Yep.
Okay, so now that we have gone through all the biggest risks, and not always just the biggest risk, they're just risks, right? But to us, we consider this the biggest risk right now. So if we're studying for the CISSP exam in 2025, this is what we're going to keep in mind. So the biggest risk in domain one was not having a policy. And I'll show you guys a great trick. It's called cross-domain correlation, a great trick just to understand why and how we need a policy. So look in domain two, we have incorrect data classification. So a policy for that, it would be implement a data classification program that follows all the stringent rules and frameworks and regulations. Domain three, key mismanagement. If management sees that the biggest risk in domain three is key mismanagement, they're going to say, make sure confidentiality is enforced. They're going to create a policy for that. Same with domain four, five, six, seven, eight. Whatever risk that say you're studying and you're 20 days out for the CSP exam. Just go through this process. Go through what you think might be a risk in domains 2 through 8, and then think about how you as a manager would fix that. And that's the CSP answer. That is what's going to make you pass the CSP. If you can think of a policy that corrects every single risk that you can think of in domains 2 through 8, you're going to be a CSP. I promise you that. So for domain 1, not having a policy, an actual strategy must be that the policies must first reflect what do we adhere to first? Laws and regulations when we create policy, or our company's own requirements? Of course, we follow policies first. They must
Yeah.
follow external laws and regulations, because if you don't follow laws and regulations, your company is not going to be afloat. So you need to follow laws first, and then you can implement policies that reflect your own corporate structure.
It's crucial. It's very crucial. Yes, I agree.
Every other domain ultimately ties back to policy in domain one.
And then the question probably comes back, how do we go ahead and choose the policy? For that, we have the frameworks, right? It's important that we refer to the frameworks. And before that, it's important to know your own business, what exactly industry you are in. And these are the kind of a mindset one should have for your CISSP exam, that knowing your business is important. It's crucial, because a policy for aerospace would be different than policy for a banking system.
True.
Or versus any kind of, let's say, a power plant, right? So these things are important. So knowing your business, and then accordingly, you need to find out the relevant frameworks or standards, right? You can look out for ISO, NIST, whatever it's relevant, and then accordingly, you can tailor down the policies for yourself.
I agree.
Domain 2, and I feel like we're rushing. I mean, it's been about 50 minutes, so I don't know if we should rush, but we should just take a little bit way through. So for domain 2, incorrect data classification. So who classifies the data? If you've been studying, you better answer as the data owner. You better know if your exam is a month away, you better know the data owner does a data classification. So what's an actionable strategy to make sure data is properly classified? And for that, Prashant and I talked about the other day, we have to make sure the data owners have mandatory training for all roles. They have to know how to classify, what the levels of classifications are. Because if you're in the government or if you're in the corporate world, there's two different sets of classifications. So you have to be trained on the proper way to do that, especially in the government. You have to know how to properly classify the different data sets. So data owners remain accountable for classification decisions, and data owners not just a manager; they're a high C-level people. They have a huge responsibility to make sure to do that, and we have to also make sure that the security professionals, we should not override, but must verify accountability of their classification. So if we see misclassification, we have to report back to the data owner. We are probably engineers, we're probably data custodians. So as data custodians, we're supposed to listen to what kind of controls they put for data classification and the controls with it. But if we see a mismatch, we have to report back to the data owner and let them know, like, hey, there might be a misclassification here, and they have to redo the classification again.
And one more important thing, we will basically see that, okay, how you see the classification perspective from the organization parameter. If you get that clarity, I think that will works for you guys. That's how we can see. On classification and all that also vary from country to company to company. So we have to see how we are classifying that. Yeah.
Okay. Anything on two, Prashant? I
No,
think
I
we
think
said what we talked about, right?
yeah,
We talked about
we
pretty much all
covered
that the other day.
everything. Yeah, yeah.
Domain 3, actionable strategies would be key mismanagement, which also means preventing key compromise and accessing. Key mismanagement means it's what's the word for when it's the crown jewel? It's the crown jewels of the company, all the keys wherever they're stored. So, what are some of the CSP concepts we can use right now that you should know for proper key security? And Yanni and I went over this yesterday, and that would be split knowledge and dual control. Just one of the two things, which also includes, separation of duties to prevent collusion and fraud, and and the other one, probably more important. Well, actually, if you want to enforce split knowledge and dual control, what do we need? If you're thinking like a manager, what do we need to do that to make sure that's in our process? And that would be a full key lifecycle management. So let me actually just put that first because having a full key lifecycle management equals enforcing split knowledge and dual control. And for split knowledge, if you guys want to know the difference, it's mental. So two people share the knowledge of a password or a security mechanism or whatever they need to, and they can be miles apart in a geographic location as long as they input the same knowledge into the system. For dual control, you have to be both have to be present at the same place at the same time. If you want a quick way to understand that, dual control, both of you present at the same time, you have to initiate the control at the same time. And split knowledge, you can be geographically separated, but also just have the knowledge of what the secret is. But
True.
above all that, make sure to have a full key life cycle. And how do you get a full key life cycle management? You got to come back to domain 1. Make sure there's a policy for full key life cycle management.
Agreed. And
Okay.
that's also applicable for data irrespective of where you're storing it. It could be in cloud, it could be in on-prem. It's very important to have a proper key management.
Definitely in the cloud. Definitely anywhere that's not on premise, you got to have full key lifecycle management. And you let
Right.
your senior managers work with the cloud vendors to establish an agreement, a security level agreement, or some sort of written document says you will follow this key lifecycle management instead of leaving it on their own.
Right.
Right.
Actionable strategies for domain 4. What do we have? Weak passwords. I mean, what is the very first thing? We might all know this because we're security professionals, but we're a very small group. Well, I mean, there's IT professionals, and then there's us, guys. Everybody on this call, we're all security professionals. And it may look like the world is full of security professionals, but I promise you there's not. We're a very small, special
Pretty
group.
small one.
So when I say require multi-factor authentication, I don't want you guys to just think, well, of course, Luke, that's of course the answer. There's a lot of people that don't know that. There's a lot of people that will, and the exam will test you on this very basic thing. That's a security plus question too, but it's also a CISSP question. And well, the exam's not going to ask you what is multi-factor authentication, but you have to know this concept to answer a very difficult CISSP practice question or a CISSP question. And if you want an easy answer on what the best way to enforce password policies, I think somebody mentioned in the chat, just follow a very best practice using NIST documents or some sort of framework. Again, you don't have to guess any of this. There's no guessing, there's no coming up with stuff in your mind. These answers have already been deployed into the field and they come in the form of NIST documents, frameworks, ISO 27001, all those things.
Yeah. Or maybe it's important to have along with these multi-factor authentication, the secure protocols that we should be using for secure communication. Like you should know TLS, VPN, all this kind of things. It's crucial.
Anki said in the chat, also know OSI layers and devices and protocols.
Oh,
100%. Again, much like
absolutely.
the software development lifecycle in domain 8, if you know nothing in domain 4 and study nothing, please know all the OSI layers. And I don't mean like the numbers, but also know the devices, the protocols, the attacks in each layer, and the countermeasures to those attacks in those layers. You know
Absolutely.
that, you're going to be okay for domain 4.
Yeah, it's a foundation. If you know this, you're probably doing good.
True.
Right. Right. Prob, anything, or I can move to actionable strategies for domain 5?
Yeah, go ahead.
Actionable strategy for domain 5. Since we just talked about curb rails, let's keep focus on what actionable strategy, what how we can prevent countermeasures to Kerberos compromise. And that would be to enforce ticket lifetime so they're not floating in the ether for unlimited amount of time because somebody does intercept that ticket or somebody does have a man in the middle within your organization. Which also it can tie back to zero trust, right? If you have Kerberos, if you don't have zero trust, you're having ticket go back and forth in the network without any kind of extra authentication. If you have zero trust, you're going to have an extra secure Kerberos implementation. So try to have ticket lifetime. Require synchronized time via NTP. Just make sure you have proper time on your system. I
Mm.
remember on the Linux firewalls, we used to synchronize the time to the Naval Observatory's atomic clocks. That was our clock server. Separate your KDC roles, which is just another way of saying separation of duties, another high level concept. And another thing to keep in mind for the CSP exam is any question, try to think, we always say to try to think of the CIA, confidentiality, integrity, availability. And if you don't see anything that relates to that, think of the broader triple A's, authentication, authorization, and most definitely accounting and accountability, which comes in the form of logging.
Okay. But one thing I would recommend here is basically principle of least privilege. That's a very important principle we need to have.
100%. 100%.
That should be the actionable strategy. Just in time access, enable that what is required, and it should be timely access. That's something
Yep.
we need to have.
So that's within the higher context of attribute-based access control. So
Exactly.
time-based geolocating. So
Yeah.
ABAC is just-in-time privilege and zero trust and all that.
Mm.
Attribute-based access control. And that was the old 2021 update of the CISSP. I think that's when it was.
Yes.
That's when it was
Yeah,
added.
Yes.
right.
Yes.
And the
They added
difference
so many
between need
things.
to know and least sorry.
Yeah, what
Difference
is that
between
difference, Prashant? What is
yeah.
that difference?
Oh,
Yanni asked me that the other day. What is that difference? Go ahead and tell us.
so
You mentioned it. You got to explain it.
absolutely. I would love to do that. So need to know is it's the rationale for knowing why exactly someone need to know this information. So if I need to access any piece of information, I need to provide a justification why. Why do I need to have this access? Once I have the need to know, then probably what I'm going to do with this access, that is defined in least privilege. Right.
Exactly.
So
I want,
it's
yeah, I want to make it more simple. Is need to know deal with the subject and least privilege three. Yeah, least privilege deal with the subject. Need to know deal with the object. More
right.
simple. Like example, the same thing
Hmm.
what he said. Uh,
Great answer. Great
yeah.
answer.
So example, your partner is speaking to their parents. Okay. You will only interfere based on need to know. Okay. You will get only information for you have, and once you have, then you will they give you limited privilege to give your suggestion. That's the least privilege. Is it clear? So when they're
Yeah.
having a discussion, they will involve you based on need to know. Okay. So that is called need to know. And then in that set of information, you need to give your opinion. That's a least privilege. Is it clear?
Whether you're supposed to give it or not. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. That's the least privilege. That's how we see. So that's a thin line difference between need to and least privilege. Need to know is deal with the object. Least privilege deal with the subject. One more example, Google Drive. I created a drive. Okay, when you click on the drive, you will get a request for access. So until unless you don't approve, you can't able to access that. It's called need to know. And once you have that, you have a read permission, write permission, what you can do on that. That's a least privilege. The same thing what he said.
I
So
can
in
I can
yeah.
sorry, I can even give an example which is pretty relevant to everyone who is going to attempt the CSSP exam.
Yeah.
So when you go to the Pearson View Center and you ask the
Hmm.
proctor that I need to know the CSSP exam question, the proctor would ask you why. And you show them your examination card that this is because I have the exam today. Here's my registration slip. Now, that was you need to know. Now, once you go and take your exam, the only privilege you have is to read the question, choose an option, and move to the next question. You cannot go back and change your choices. And at the same time, you also have the privilege only for 180 minutes because least privilege is also tied up to the least amount of time. So
True.
you have access to that information and the actions you're going to do it only for 180 minutes.
True. And that's how you plan your strategies. Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, Faisal said something really good. He said due diligence is need to know, a broader perspective. Excuse me. And due care is least privilege, a more granular and immediate fix. I like that. I like that one. But also like Prob's example, need to know is subjects and least privilege is the permission on the objects. Right, Prob? Is that what you said?
Need to know is basically on the object. Least privilege is on a subject. Yeah, that
Oh, yes,
perspective.
yes, yes. Object, object. Let me
Yeah.
just put that. Nice one, Faisal. This chat is awesome. This chat is great. Domain 6, lack of
Mm.
automated testing. The actionable strategy is to have automated testing, obviously, but the important thing to know is that it's the when, where, how, and why. So mandate continuous vulnerability scanning and penetration testing. You can't just do it once in the lifetime of the company and be over with. Because I know it costs money. I know it takes a lot of effort. So pen testing or penetration testing or vulnerability scanning, if there's an exam question that talks about pen testing, vulnerability scanning, and talks about when, where, how, or you have to think about why. Why is a company implementing it, say, once a year? Or when should we do it? Is the answer time based? Is it like once a year and that's it? Okay, once a year is not too bad. How about if we do it twice a year? That's good too for security, right? Twice a year, make sure everything's covered. Or should we do it 3 times a year? Whichever one is good too. Oh, maybe every month. If we do it every month, we're going to be very secure. But that's a lot of effort. That's a lot of efficiency. That's a lot of inefficiency, a lot of cost, and a lot of time on the company. Remember, pen testing involves the whole company. It's not just a pen tester and just their team. It's the whole company. There's going to be mass documentation and alerts that, hey, we're doing pen testing today. Please be aware. Corporate pen testing is ongoing all week. Be aware of systems this. So you as an employee are doing your own job while being aware of what else is going on. So doing it every single month is not very cost efficient. It's a lot of overhead. There's 2 times that you need to do pen testing and vulnerability scanning or any of those tests. Once, at least once a year, annually. That's the CISSP answer, annually. And the think like a manager answer is whenever there's a change to a system, whenever there's a
Major
change to a
change.
server,
Major change.
whenever
Yeah.
a major change to the company has happened, you add a new device, you take away a new device, you update a firmware, you add new software code. That qualifies as an action to have pen testing or any kind
True.
of security testing. Domain 7, no incident response to a password compromise. What's the answer? Implement incident response. Good, but we're not those kind of CSP instructors. We're a little bit more elite than that. We're going to give you a little bit more high level, which is implement NIST 861 incident response lifecycle. It's all about life cycles and following documentation. So if you were sitting there and us three were not on a call and we gave you this sheet and you're looking at this and it's like, oh man, what's it? I mean, you can just look at this as a CSP question, right? Pretend you're on the exam. A question
Mm.
says there's no incident response to a password compromise and this place is blank. It's blank right now. You don't have to sit there and punish yourself and try to come up with an answer. I'm like, I wonder what it is. I can't. Is it do I restart the firewall or do I ask permission? No. The answer is here. The answer is a process. It's a function. It's steps that have
Mm.
already been defined. It's the NIST 800 incident response lifecycle. That's the specific one. But what you're understanding here is that you have to use a process and yet you're
True.
following steps one to whatever.
But it is very important that you need to know the process. And one more important thing I missed here to cover is we have a open source component in their risk, and you need to have visibility of SBOM, software bill of materials, and the tool that we are using to inspecting open source component is SCM, guys. So those who are preparing for that, you need to have visibility about this area also.
Yep, yep, yep. What was the first one? SBOM, SBAM, right?
SBOM,
Right, Pro?
SBOM, software bill of
Software bill
material.
of materials.
Yeah, like the way we buy a food, anything we see the food material, what is the composition of food. So that is basically same when we take a open source component and all that we need to have visibility what is inside that. And those who are preparing for the certification, make sure you should have a very good visibility about the SBOM
And
and
it's
SPA.
also one of the regulatory requirement from DORA,
DORA,
Digital
yeah.
Operation Resiliency Act. They
Yeah.
mandate you to, and people who are working in the US and other kind of regions, it might not be important, but for EU people who are working in the EU companies, it's
Mm,
mandatory to capture those third-party components, SBOM components, the
mm,
knowledge of these components. It's important to track it.
exactly.
Man, you guys are really good. You guys are very good CSP instructors. Man, I don't know why anybody
That's why
goes
after
anywhere else.
Shakira, we are the one we don't lie.
We do not lie. Our hips don't lie. They do not. Kieran
I
Faisal,
said
or
I said
Kieran.
lips don't lie, Luke. Don't
Oh, my
misinterpret the
my
statement.
my
You
eyes are
are
somewhere
wrong, man.
else.
Yeah.
My eyes are somewhere else.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Kieran, we'll get to all questions and stuff at the end.
Yep.
Um, just me. I mean, I can. I got. We got time. Actionable strategy for domain 8: insecure third-party software. Third-party software, meaning software that is not on premise, meaning it's not in our control. How do we secure software created somewhere else by someone else with someone else? How do we do that? Why? How do we even convince some other company to make sure? How would I tell Amazon? How would I tell a third-party software company that I hired in the middle of Europe saying, "Hey, I need you to have secure party"? They're not going to listen to me, or are they? They will if you enforce secure coding standards and check out their own coding standards. So that means if they're using OWASP or NIST or SSDF, require this other thing that we know about is in case they lose your code, code escrow agreements. And what
Mm.
all this done is not just enforce software development. You're not going to tell them what to code. That's not the point of securing third-party software. You're not going to tell them what language to use. You're not going to tell them what component or how the code is going to be structured. What you're going to do is ask them, hey, are you using a good software development life? Are you even using a software development life cycle? Are you using what model are you using? Are you using agile model? Which one are you doing? If they're using good, strong, best practice software development life cycles, then you know they're kind of going to do a good job, right? They're going to have a
Mm.
pretty good job. And for assurance for their system development life cycle, we refer to things like common criteria, assurance. If you go to Checkpoint's website, if you go to Palo Alto's website, they will gladly show you their common criteria certification to show you that this system has been developed securely, even though you don't know what it is or what we did. Just the fact that they use this common criteria assurance level shows you they met at least a minimum level of security that is satisfactory to not just you but the whole general public. Two
And one
important
more important
concepts.
thing, but one thing is that when it comes to the waterfall and agile, guys, you need to have very good clarity on the agile manifestos. Okay, that's a very important part. You need to know how the sprints work, in which particular stage of security, in which particular stage of security of agile comes, in which condition we can use waterfall, in which condition we can use agile. That's a very important part because those who are from India, they have seen this movie, which is a very famous movie of Allu Arjun, and the dialogue he said, "मैं झुकेगा नहीं साला." So that is basically the example of waterfall. Okay, once you took the requirement, you will start working on that. You cannot go back. So that is called waterfall. Agile is
Which is
basically like a Surya Vansham movie where the Amitabh Bachchan follow his dad guideline. Whatever my dad say, I will follow that. Like whatever the Babuji will say, we will follow that. That is basically called as a agile model. So I'm sure everyone is a victim of agile meeting where we have a daily meeting and weekly meeting. So that is a live example of that. So we have to see the project details, and according to that, we need to understand where we need to place the thing. So you need to have that clarity about agile and waterfall. Yeah,
What is that Amitabh Bachchan movie called?
Amitabh Bachchan movie is Surya Vansham. It's actually a national movie declared by the Indian government.
right.
It
Wow.
comes in every set max every month. So I think those who are
Every
from
week.
India, yeah, every
Every week.
week. So anyone from India, they know, okay, even it is come in the 10th standard syllabus. Why he got Jaher and all
Food,
that.
food poisoning. Why
Food
you got
poisoning.
food
Yeah.
poisoning eating rice porridge?
Yeah. Until unless you don't watch that movie, you cannot pass 10th standard. That's a minimum criteria in India. And
I-
now it's going to be, yeah,
if
yeah.
if we ever plan to edit this video, maybe we can add a lot of memes around it. And
Yeah, I'm sure it
speaking of
will be a great hit. Yeah.
speaking
Mm.
of memes, and I'm pretty sure that the entire world or the security fraternity wants
Mm.
Prab to write down a book that
Mm.
is filled with entire analogies and the memes for each and every topic. I'm pretty sure that there would be a huge demand, right?
Yes, yes. We need a whole series on that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um,
Okay.
Okay,
so
continue. Yeah.
anything else?
Polymorphism, polyinstantiation. Yeah.
Anything else, guys?
No, I think we're good. I think we covered most of it, and I think it was one of the unique kind of a format we chose. The
Yeah.
structure we have never done this,
Yeah.
and
For
and and
sure.
it's Friday night for us, for people in India, and it's like I'm amazed to see
Mm.
people are still there. right?
Me
But
too.
before I want to before we wind up this session and all that, guys, there's a one important thing you need to understand. There's a difference between the opinion and facts. This exam is difficult, you can't make it, so much to read. This is called opinion, which create a lot of negative emotions in your mind. This exam is difficult because you have to read the book. That's an actionable item. This I'm not able to understand the question because I don't know the concept. That is basically called as a fact. Okay. So the biggest, 0.1% who people who go for this exam and 19% who don't go for the exam because of the opinion. They see the LinkedIn opinion. This exam is difficult. The losers who boast on LinkedIn is, the certification doesn't matter. And, the crazy people doing certification, it's okay. That doesn't live your life. So don't go by those people opinion. Okay, the exam syllabus is vast, questions are difficult. I know difficult exam is difficult, but you need to support understand the facts. If you're clear with the facts, it give you happiness, it give you a defined motivation, it give you the clarity. It is same like, let's take example, you are in the room, okay, and then light is off. There's no light. Okay, you are in a dark room. So how you find your phones, how you find your, assets and all that? By just pressing, okay, where it is. So same like in CISSP. If you just enter in dark room, you're just thinking about syllabus. This is like how you switch on the light, you see the clarity. Okay, this is where the books are there. This is where the questions are there. Build your own map. Okay, so instead of going for the opinion, go for the facts because facts will give you more happiness. Now, the parameter here is how to practice questions or how to start the questions. So my suggestion is that when it comes to questions and all that, yeah. So the first, Luke, you want to go ahead with the question bank?
Look, there's a lot of questions out there, and
Hmm.
with ChatGPT and AI, it's becoming a pool of questions that have no warrants or background. I am
Hmm.
going to just suggest, if you're just starting with the CISSP or if you're in the middle of it, get the very foundational ones first. Your Sean Harris ninth edition book with the practice questions, plus the practice questions in that book. Your Cybex book, plus the practice question book. Even the ISC squared book and the ISC squared practice question book. I'm going to tell you, everyone, just to keep it very official for now, because that's where it's coming from. It's coming from an official place. And the ISC squared book is going to tell you what the vocabulary and the structure of the questions might be, but not completely. The Cybex will teach you, but the Cybex will test your concepts and topics on quick concepts and topics on stuff you've just read. But the very best practice questions I can probably give to you is the Sean Harris accompanying book full of those practice questions. I don't know what it is about those questions, but reading them, I don't even care about getting them right or wrong, but just reading them, reading the practice questions and the explanations, I felt good. I felt like I was becoming so strong in CISV concept that I had no problem on the exam itself because I was trained so much by those questions. So for me, I'm not gonna recommend anything else besides the official books. And I hate to talk this about other authors on Amazon and stuff, but if there's a book that says CISU practice questions 2025 or 2024, read through it and make sure it doesn't sound like every other CISU practice question book, and try not to buy the books that are made by ChatGPT because it's doing you a disservice because they're running it through the engine, they're copying, pasting, and there's no heart into it. There's no heart, there's no soul, there's no like experienced knowledge that I've read. And I'd hate for you to just read that and give yourself either a false sense of security or even worse, a false sense of insecurity about your exam. So try to go with the baseline foundation books first. And after you've gone through those, feel free to look up any other courses, any other apps and practice questions that you think have been rated well by people, and then go for those.
I think it's not at all difficult thing what resource to follow. World has, like, there are a lot of people, 150,000 plus people across the world have passed CSSP, and they all
Hmm.
have mentioned the same resources over and over and over again. Pick it,
Don't leave the session, guys. We are going to discussing very important Q&A. Don't leave the session. Might be it's very important for you guys. Yeah, continue, Prashant.
So pick one book out of the books what just Luke mentioned about the Sean Harris official study guide, whatever works for you. It's not like one shoe fits all kind of a situation. Whatever works for you, whatever the language you're able to comprehend, something that ease your mind, something that you're able to conceive and digest, just pick that up. There are so many non-credible resources, like what Luke was mentioning. There are people who are generating the books through AI, right? Or there's some kind of a garbage book that someone would say that, hey, these are the most important dumps you would need to pass the examination. Trust me, there's nothing called as dump, right? There's nothing
Hmm.
called as dump. And people who have might have taken some kind of a contract position with IAC2, they know how exactly IAC2 functions, right? There is a reason why IAC2 has been able to maintain the integrity of this exam from last 3 decades, right? It's very, very different kind of an organization, the way it works. So there are tons of resources. Most of them are credible. So you know the authors, you know Mike Chappell, you know Sean Harris, you know the authors from Destination Certification, whatever the resources work for you, right? From taking the book, whatever things that something which is going to work for you as an individual, use that, right? Focus on whatever works for you rather than looking at all sort of like 15 or 20 different resources that people post on LinkedIn. They all are good, not denying that. But start with the official ones, the something which is quite credible and used in the industry.
And if you don't find one, just ask us.
Yeah,
We'll let you know. We're always there for others. I mean, Prashant Prab, we're always answering questions. We're not unreachable. We may not answer right away, but we'll definitely answer and let you know. I mean, if Prab's busy, ping me. If I'm busy, ping Prashant. That's just how we operate.
Exactly.
absolutely.
Um, do we need to do a final concept that ties everything together, Prashant, or have we just kind of said that? My final concept that ties everything together is this. I started with my Security Plus, my Network Plus, and my CCNA. And I thought I needed a change. I needed to make a difference. And I picked up the CISSP book and I said, oh, do we just have to read this book and pass the exam? I kind of thought that. So I did that, read the entire book, and then I started reading that that is not at all what it is. And I needed to know more CISSP concepts. And to know that, I was working at a security job as a network security engineer, and I started applying everything I read in my books to my job. So if you're studying for a CSP and you work in the security industry, try to relate what you read in your books. Once I did that, I promise you, some of the stuff I did in my real world and nothing that I read in my books helped me pass the exam. There was a time on my job where I did staging of firewalls. I put it on the staging rack and we swapped them out. We did a lot of provisioning, deprovisioning, and doing that helped me answer some of the questions on the CSP exam. I won't say which one, but that whole process helped me answer. And there's nothing I could have learned in the books. So applying the concept you learned in the book helps with you to apply it to at your job. And the final concept is, guys, I'm just so proud to be in this cybersecurity space and share this space with you guys. We're doing such a fantastic job for not just us and our children, but for people 100 years from now. Right now, we are just winging it. We don't know what we're doing. We're getting overwhelmed with attacks. We're getting overwhelmed with new technologies. We're learning something new every week. 100 years from now, I guarantee you, they're gonna look back at us and they're gonna say, "Wow, those guys did it with sticks and stones." While we have multitude dimensional types of AI with us that helps us do everything. We're doing it at a very primitive level, and I'm just so proud that you guys did that. And I want you to know that even if you just picked up the first book and turned just the first page, you turn just the first page, you are halfway there to becoming a CISP, and I hope you stick with it. Even if you don't make it the first time, second time, third, fourth, somebody I know passed it the sixth time. I promise you it's worth it. So my final concept to you guys is if you're studying for the CISSP, please stick with it. We need you in the industry, and I hope to see you on the other side. And if you need help, all three of us are here to help you cross the finish line.
That's great. And one of the most common question they have asked about the question bank is pick one question bank, but make sure you should be clear with the mindset of this question bank. And second thing is that yeah, I agree on that part is 2024, 25. There's a lot of question bank came in the pictures and all that. So we need to have a clarity about how who is the author, what is the source of the author, what is the validations. So that clarity you need to have, because until unless you don't have that clarity, you can't able to make that. See, we are instructors who doesn't have a things to promote other instructors. If you think cybex official questions, why we doing that? Because to understand the cybex book. I will give an example. Like, you don't have a time to read the cybex books, practice cybex questions. So when you read the cybex questions, is it clear? When you read the cybex questions, you're reading a cybex book. So that's how you bridge the gap. Now you need to understand the mindset of how to core think like a manager. Yeah, core language, CISSP, go for boson. Week before the exam, you can go for the Luke Hammer. That's very important because that help you to build the mindset.
Oh,
Think like a
thank you,
manager.
bro.
Yeah, no, no, definitely it mean it because that help you to improve the reading. It help you to improve the thought process. And all. It's very important to understand the thought process of that book because that book give you thought process how to think like a manager. You want to eliminate the options how to think like a manager and all that. That video is there from what is that guy called? um, there's a very popular video. He's based on US, or I think I forget the name. Andrew Ramdayal. His videos are good to understand how to think like a manager and all that. You can go for it. Destination certification question bank. We I saw a lot of good reviews on Reddit. You can check that. Those questions are basically prepared by the founders of destination certifications. Only thing is that when you practice, my session is start with the Cybex question bank because that give you clarity about the book. And then if you think you're getting less score, then you can go for the boson questions. But make sure week before the exam you should complete the Luke Ahmed question because that give you the final context and then penetrate into the exam and all that. So that's something you can do, and make sure week before the exam, for the quick revision you can go for the one of the my favorite book is basically known author in the market called Memory Palace. It is like a mini summary of the entire CISSP you will get in a week.
I love that
That's a
book.
yeah. So even in my case, my students they don't read the book; they read that particular notes, Memory Palace, which give you the overall context of how to think like a manager. So that's something is there. And if you're struggling on some technical topic, you can refer my coffee shots. Again, we are telling you, we are not here to promote things. You think that content is making sense, go for it. If not, you think your enough resources are there to validate things, that is enough. So that's something you can
Yes.
plan it. Yeah.